Hey, it's Pastor Chris, and welcome to day 5 of the Holy Week experience. Hope that God is richly blessing you in this most unique time, but in this most significant week of all of human history. You know, we're talking about Thursday. And on Thursday, Jesus is going to take what will become known as the Lord's Supper, but then it was the Passover supper with his disciples. And Jesus, here's what you have to understand, was a Jew who practiced from the southern part of Israel. And there were others who practiced from the northern part of Israel. So Passover was really an interpretive event. Here's what I mean by that. Jesus took the Lord's Supper on Thursday, but if you remember, there were people who said that his crucifixion had to end before sundown of the Sabbath on Friday because people in the north practiced the Passover on Friday. So there were 250,000 lambs in that city, and you can imagine that then there were at least at the Temple Mount, there were kind of 2 waves of people at different times making sacrifices. And on Thursday, Jesus takes the Lord's Supper with his disciples. Take a look at this.
Who do you think prepared the Last Supper? Look, bread, it's easy enough. It's flour, water, a little salt, herbs if you want more flavor. Normally you'd add yeast, but not at Passover. No, at Passover we cannot wait for the bread to rise. Our deliverance from Pharaoh is at hand. So the story goes. Passover is always the same. We eat the bread, we drink the wine, there's lamb, bitter herbs. We remember our deliverance and our coming deliverance. Next year in Jerusalem, we always say, Messiah will come. It's always the same. But sometimes it seems so far away, so complicated. But this year, things were, well, 2 men followed our servant home from fetching water. They were wanting a place to celebrate Passover with their rabbi, and my husband and I, we had an extra room. So I baked the unleavened bread, and I delivered it when they arrived. The rabbi graciously introduced himself, and a horde of 12 men followed him into our upper room. I'd heard about this rabbi. Wild tales of healing blind men, raising the dead, and walking on water. So naturally, I stood outside the door and I peeked around the corner. And that is when he turned it all upside down. You see, the person who sits at the head of the table isn't supposed to get up and wash other people's feet. But this rabbi, he was moving from man to man, washing each of their dirty feet. Well, I pulled back before I was seen, but still, I listened. I stayed and listened. His words were sure, kind, but like fire, like no rabbi I'd ever heard. If you see me, then you see the Father, he said. He also said that he would be broken for them. He talked of the new covenant and being children rather than orphans. And as the bread was passed, the unleavened bread of deliverance, he said, I am the living bread. Living bread. What could we have understood about that at the time? A new covenant was coming, and our deliverance was at our doorstep. Little did we know that our entire world was about to be turned upside down.
Now, Faith Family and others, I want to encourage you to join us Easter weekend as we celebrate the Lord's resurrection. And in preparation for that, one thing I want to encourage you to do is have the elements for the Lord's Supper available to you at whatever Easter service you choose to worship at. Make it simple, right? Use what you have. Don't feel like you have to go out and get grape juice or whatever it is you're going to use, or you have to get some kind of special bread. Use whatever bread you have, whatever kind of drink you can have. In fact, I want to encourage you to do this. Take pictures of whatever it is you use with you and your family and hashtag that Easter at FBW, okay? Hashtag Easter at FBW. And we would love to see what you use. After Jesus takes the Lord's Supper with his disciples, the Bible tells us in John chapter 13, he does something very significant. Here's what he says. He says, now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. I love that. He loved them to the end. Jesus is about to go to the cross. This is about to be the most demanding thing that any human has ever gone through. This is about to be excruciatingly painful personally. This is going to be agonizing over these next hours. But what does Jesus do? Jesus thinks about others. And Jesus says he loved them to the end. It says, and during supper, when the devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. Think about that. Jesus is going to do this, what he's about to do, this incredible act. He's about to do this for one who's going to betray him. And Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things to his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper, and he laid aside his outer garment and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. And then he poured water into a basin. He began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel that was wrapped around him. Why did Jesus do that? Jesus did that because when they entered into that place, there was not a servant, usually the youngest, most insignificant servant there in the house, who would meet the guests and they would wipe their feet. Jesus, knowing that this need had not been met, this basic common need had not been met. And here's Jesus on the eve of the cross. He's about to go to a kangaroo court. He's about to be humiliated. And yet Jesus, because he loved them to the end, what does he do? He does one more selfless act. And he humbles himself as a servant. And he washes the dirty, dirty feet of these 12 and even one who's going to betray him. Why do I tell you that and remind us of that? I remind you of that because it's so easy whenever we get into this situation like we all find ourselves in, where the walls are starting getting smaller, where our interactions with people have been cut off, where we just begin to have just this pity party, if you will, about what is so wrong with us, and we just become very inwardly and selfishly focused. If anybody ever had the right to do that, it would have been Jesus as he was about to go to that cross. But what does Jesus do? Jesus thinks about other people and he serves other people even to the very last moment he's able. And friends, I want to encourage you, no matter how bad you think you have it, you will always feel better when you serve somebody else. Get creative, figure out what that looks like. But take a towel and wipe and clean somebody else's feet, and I promise you something, you'll be blessed.